Hello YouTube, this is Bruno. Let's talk about looting universal mob farms in Minecraft Java. Now, why would you build a looting version of these mob farms? Very simple, they have higher rates. Over 50% higher, in fact. We get experience from this farm, which is very nice, especially early in the game, when you need something to get levels or to mend stuff. We do get a few more drops. Apart from the arrows and the rotten flesh, we do get spider eyes, which might be helpful for brewing. We get a ton of unstackables. Now the bows might be useful to craft dispensers. Of course, that's a lot easier with the crafter in 121. And we also get these random drops here, which are the witch drops, but also stuff that zombies can hold. For example, iron ingots. We get a few raw chickens. Zombies or zombie villagers might have carrots. And we get all of those heads. Because like Hermitcraft, we have this mod that gives us more mob heads. So we have basically heads for all of the mobs that we kill. And we'll get a ton of spider heads, zombie villager heads and stuff like that. Which is really nice if you want to do armor stands. So again, all of this is nice to have. But the fact that the rates are higher are really the clincher for me. And the effort of this farm is pretty much the same as the effort for a normal non-looting mob farm. It's just that the storage is slightly complicated and you need a bit of a kill chamber on top. So first let's look at the rates before we get into the designs. Here is the version without looting, built as low as possible over the ocean, and we get over 12,000 total drops per hour with roughly 2,600 arrows and bones, 2,400 gunpowder and rotten flesh, and a bit less string, just under 2,000. We also get a few witch drops, most importantly 200 redstone dust, which isn't bad at all. Over 1.5 shulker boxes per hour for each of the main jobs, which are bones and gunpowder. But we can do better. So what happens if we have the player kill the mobs here? Even though the farm is built a lot higher, so that nothing can spawn on the ground. We have about 26k total drops, with around 4,500 each of gunpowder, bones, arrows and rotten flesh, along with 3,500 string, 2,800 spider eyes and a ton of armor and bows. This means we increase the interesting drops, which are of course bones and gunpowder, by 80%. Both gunpowder and bones were around 2,500 per hour without looting and are now 4,500 with looting. That's a very nice increase of the rates. We get a lot more spider eyes from a looting farm, because here we get the farm if we kill the spiders and not just from the occasional witch. You need spider eyes for potions of weakness and for fermented spider eyes. And I always build a universal mob farm anyway, so why not grab the spider eyes as well and save me the hassle to build a witch farm for the spider eyes or even a spawner based spider farm. The rest of the drops I guess is less interesting. The witch drops we get better from a witch farm, but still there might be cases where you are even interested in the potatoes or the carrots because you haven't found a village yet that has them. So that's a way to get those. So I covered looting mob farms before, but wanted to revisit that for a number of reasons. On one hand, the kill chamber is much improved. It's no longer directional, doesn't use any cakes. I will give you two versions, one like here with an armor stand and a beacon, and another early game version without a beacon. Now what you need here is this type of overclocked regeneration beacon. And also in that old video I didn't do a good job on the storage system, because if you have all of these unstackable items but you still want to filter out the stackable items, or you maybe want to have a chest where only the unstackable items end up, then you have to do a bit of redstone. It's not complicated, but I didn't talk about that in my last video. So let's do better this time. Let's head to a creative world and have a look at the different designs. This is your run-of-the-mill universal mob farm that has become the standard ever since the great Gnembon introduced it somewhere around Minecraft, I don't know, 1.13 or even earlier. Do check out Gnembon's original video on these mob farms if you have never seen it. It's a few years old, but it hasn't lost any relevance and it's simply the best video explaining all of the mechanics involved. So we have flushing platforms where the mobs can spawn, and periodically we activate dispensers to flush all of the mobs down, where they fall into water streams and are moved to a kill chamber. And here they die by fall damage. Now of course there are much faster mob farms if you go down in the perimeter, but we're talking early game farms here that are built in the overworld. And in my opinion, this is just the best design that is out there. Now, very recently, Potato Noir introduced some improvements to this farm. So go check out this video if you want another deep dive into the mechanics of these mob farms. He presents ways to increase the size of these spawning platforms and therefore increase the rate. But in this video, I'll just go with the basic design because most of you are familiar with that. Now, as this is an early game design, and this will be your first source of gunpowder and bones, we absolutely want to build this in a place where we don't have to spawn-proof everything. So that means that the player AFK is high enough that we don't have to spawn-proof anything on the ground. And this means, of course, that the mob farm is in the despawn sphere around the player standing there, but nothing else is. So nothing can spawn here in the ocean or on the ground if you build this on solid ground. But of course, the lower we build it, the higher the rates are. So we try to build this as low as possible. And in this case, I've built everything over an ocean because this is as low as you can get without digging. Or you could build this in a low plains biome as well. The rates will be slightly lower, but nothing to worry about. So in the simple farm, we don't have much of a sorting system. We have item filters, which are the signal strength independent item filters here, that are just a little bit more complicated, but allow you to put a full stack in. Of course, if you just have a few double chests, then the issue is that at some point these will be full, everything will back up, and the items will go through. So at the end, I have a chest for the witch drops, which filled up with witch drops and stuff like that at the start. But of course, as the other chests were full, the other drops also end up in here. The killing here is done by fall damage, and the drop is high enough to kill most zombies and spiders. Now, I'm not sure about witches, they have a little bit more health, but we have these soul campfires here. In any case, the witches will be killed before they can spawn fire arrest potions, like that. And also some zombies or skeletons might spawn with armor and survive the fall. This is why we have these soul campfires here that will kill any mob that survives the fall. I just use glass for the drop chute so you can see what's going on. Of course, you can use any building blocks there. The platforms are as described by Gnembon, which are diamonds with a radius of 8 blocks. The platforms are made out of top slabs because mobs cannot pathfind on top slabs. The flushing cycle is optimized as I described it in the previous video. So we flush these platforms for just under 4 seconds. Sometimes a few mobs might end up here on the edge, but almost all of them are flushed down. The clock here is a comparator fader pulse extender which runs 3 seconds, and it's powered by another repeater pulse extender that runs for 0.8 seconds, so this should be the total time, 3.8 seconds. And here we power an observer that is hidden in there. And this is of course an etho hopper clock. And this number of items depend a bit on the number of platforms. So for this size, something like 25 items is optimal. And of course, we have a roof so that all of the platforms have a light level of 0, even during the day. That's basically it. I'm pretty sure you have seen this mob farm before, but let's get to the looting version. And we have to move this farm 120 blocks higher, because in this case, of course, the player stands at the bottom of the farm. And we still don't want to spawn-proof anything on the ground. The spawning area, the roof and the clock, these are all exactly the same. Also the drop chute. The only difference is the kill chamber here. So here the player hits an armor stand that has somehow acquired a bit of armor itself. And the mobs fall down onto these water streams. And we have water sources on this side, so the mobs are moved towards the player. And if the mobs are over these hoppers here, they will be hit by the sweeping attack. And again, we have hoppers collecting the drops. In this case, the farm is faster than a 3 times hopper speed, so we need 3 double speed hoppers to collect all of the drops. And all are pretty much independent, go into these droppers here and have an observer clock. And the drops go all into this cobweb here. All 3 droppers go into the same cobweb and fall down into the sorting system. So I also added an armor stand dispensing system here. So what can happen on a server is that the armor stand breaks. Then the armor stand will be collected by this hopper, go into this dropper, and then this clock activates and redispenses it. If I just grab a sword and hit this armor stand a couple of times, it will be immediately redispensed. And what sometimes happens, and apparently very rarely, some armor glitches into here and this armor would then end up here on the armor stand, but that's not an issue. So you're safe, and the way to use this farm is just to crouch and to go in here and press against the back and then start your auto clicker. Now, as you're facing an armor stand, you can't eat, and this means eventually you would starve to death. Now, what we added here is an overclocked beacon, and the beacon has regeneration. And the overclocking is necessary because some of the mobs might have thorns. Now, without the thorns, the player could survive with just a regeneration beacon. That's not an issue. But with the thorns, the player takes additional damage, and a normal regeneration beacon can't repair that. And this was described by Too Know to Name a while ago. I will link the video, of course. So what we have here is a clock that is on for 16 game ticks and then off for 16 game ticks. And we block the beacons. And what you can observe, if you go to the inventory and observe the normal beacon time, you see that it goes down all the way until 9 seconds. And this is the way it should be. So the other beacon, which is the strength beacon, always resets once it hits 13. But this regeneration beacon goes a bit longer, and this is the overclocking that is required to repair just a bit more damage. Now, it can happen if the beacon is not synchronized with the server or the game that this also resets after a couple of seconds. So in this case, just turn off the beacon for a moment, turn it on again, and hopefully the beacon will once again go down all the way to 9 seconds. Okay, this is the state where it's wrong. So just turn it off, turn it on again, and observe if it goes down after a reset like that. If it doesn't, turn it off, turn it on again. Now, you can survive for quite a while without armor. However, if you get unlucky and you have several mobs with thorns in here at the same time, which might happen once every couple of hours, you could still die because you take too much damage in a short time. So I would recommend to use some form of armor. Probably even unenchanted diamond armor is enough, maybe even unenchanted iron armor. I wouldn't recommend to go in there naked here like our carpetbot Steve. Now, there are a few details to consider. First, of course, the player needs to be 24 blocks under the lowest platform, because in a radius of 24 blocks around the player nothing can spawn. So let's create the spawn sphere here. But you see that I have actually made this a bit higher. We have a despawn sphere that includes all of these walls here. And the reason is that rarely, but it happens, spiders will climb up these walls and end up here. And if they were closer than 32 blocks to the player, they would never despawn. So I moved this water streams and the spawning blocks just a few blocks higher so that the border of these water streams is not in the do not despawn area. And of course, what we sometimes get is climbing spiders. And the reason is that spiders can sense the player even through obstacles. So they will sense the players through the trapdoors, and whenever they can't pathfind to a player, they will start climbing. It's not a really big issue because the next wave of mobs will push the spiders right back in. So at any time you might have on average 2 or 3 spiders climbing or chilling here. I haven't really found anything that we can do about it. So if you know something, let me know. So you see that the player is kind of wedged in here. And in fact, to get in here, you have to crouch. And the reason is that if you meet a zombie with thorns and attack the armor stand, you will get basically pushed back in a random direction. So the player might get pushed back anywhere here on this side. If we wouldn't wedge in the player, so if we hadn't these blocks or the slab, then the player might be pushed out of range away from the armor stand. So the player needs to be enclosed from all 4 sides And of course the easiest way to do this is just use a slab. And that's the reason why we don't have a trapdoor here but a slab. Of course we need a hopper under the slab to collect the drops that will end up here on the slab. Now, can we get around the beacon? Yeah, absolutely. Although the rates are slightly lower here, by perhaps 10%. Let's check it out. It's in the world download just over here. And the design is pretty much the same, except we don't have the armor stand and the replacement system. And instead, we have a stone cutter. And the player will hit the mobs through the stone cutter. So what you do is you go in here, you wedge yourself right back against this corner, and you aim just past this trapdoor like so. And then you start your periodic attack. You will hit the mobs. The water stream is a bit different. The water stream this time goes from this corner to this corner. And you see it takes a bit longer because you hit fewer mobs. And that's the reason why the rates are a bit lower. But you will still eventually kill all of the mobs. In the end, the difference is just 10%, so that's not a big issue. Of course, what you absolutely need is to have food in the offhand and at the same time to use the periodic attack and to continuous hold. So to right click all of the time. Now if we get hit by thorns, we might still get pushed back to the other side. So we might get pushed back to this side, but in this case we will still hit the mobs and then maybe another thorns attack will push us back in our initial position. This is why we aim the way we aim. Yeah, there it just happened. Very nice. But in this spot you can AFK, well, not forever, but quite a long time. So the drawback of this farm, again, the rates are a bit lower, you have to aim very precisely, and you can't AFK forever, because due to the thorns you will take more damage than you usually would. And this means you need to eat more often. I gave my carpet bot a stack of golden carrots and it died in under 5 hours as the carrots were used up, which is significantly faster than any other farm. So don't AFK for too long, check from time to time if you have enough food every couple of hours. This farm does not require a beacon, so obviously it's more early game friendly and cheaper. But due to the drawbacks, I would recommend to equip the farm with a beacon and then change the kill area, because the farm layout is exactly the same with the one exception of that you have this slight variation in the kill chamber. You can always start building the farm like that, and once you acquire beacons and once you have an iron farm, you can build a beacon here and put in an armor stand. With the storages, obviously you can mix and match. Such a simple storage will be full after maybe 3 hours, which is a decent amount of gunpowder and bones, of course, but in the long run you might want to do something smarter. So this is the simple looting farm, and one thing that you can easily do is to replace the chest with a shulker box loader. So in this case I have shulker box loaders for the 5 main drops, which are still string, gunpowder, arrows, bones, rotten flesh, and I also added a filter for redstone. Now we don't get a ton of redstone drops, so I just have a chest here. And of course I used an auto crafter to craft the redstone dust into blocks. So this is this design here. And in this version I don't really try to get the witch drops, I have just one chest tower. But this chest tower, now observe that I also don't sort the spider eyes, because I don't really know what to do with shulker boxes and shulker boxes of spider eyes. But in this chest where we get all of the armor, there will be enough spider eyes for your brewing need. So you can craft plenty of fermented spider eyes, but as soon as this chest tower is full, all of the drops will just go here into the fire. This is acceptable, but we can do something a bit cleverer. I don't really know what to do with shulker boxes and shulker boxes of rotten flesh and arrows and string. Now you could auto-craft a string to wool maybe, but I have a sheep farm. So what I present here is pretty much the storage that I use on the Hemisphere server. For some drops, and in this case I have configured it for rotten flesh, for spider eyes and for string, I will just fill up a few double chests. Once the chests are full, the drops will go into this dropper and then just destroyed by the soul campfire. And the same is true for spider eyes and rotten flesh. So I want that, I can just grab a few stacks and the rest will be filtered out and burned so they don't end up here, which makes handling of these unstackables much easier. Then I have the drops that I want to collect. I want to collect bones and gunpowder, of course, and the bones I also want to autocraft into bone blocks. So if we put in a few bones here, again we have the signal strength independent filters. So these bones will be autocrafted to bone blocks, and the bone blocks go into the shulker box loader. The gunpowder obviously goes into the shulker box loader, and I will also use a shulker box loader for the arrows. Maybe you want arrows, for example for mini games, or if you have a chorus farm that needs arrows. But of course you could also use this configuration. As you can see, you can tile that, not exactly with the autocrafter here, so maybe put that on the outside, but you can later decide which drops you want and which drops you won't. And now what ends up here are all the unstackables and the random drops. And what I do here is we have an unstackable item filter. So these unstackable item filters will go into this side. So this chest tower only contains unstackables. And once this chest tower is full, this dropper, this is always the way to do that. You have two droppers on top of each other. The lower dropper has priority. Once an item comes in, first the lower hopper will try to grab the item, so the item will end up in here if there's space. If this hopper is full, the items will go into this dropper and be once again turned into soul fire. And here on the other side we have the remaining drops, which are the witch drops, but also some random drops like iron and carrots and potatoes, stuff that zombies can hold, or zombie villagers. It can happen very rarely that drops pass our signal strength independent item filters, but here you see we have almost 2 full double chests and only a bit of rotten flesh, so let's get rid of that. And if this chest tower should also be full, it would also go into this dropper and also be destroyed. So that's kind of the thing that I do. I preserve the drops that I want to have in shulker boxes. I have an output for the unstackables. Of course you could also add another item filter for the redstone. You could add item filter for other stuff. As I said, you can mix and match. You can combine any type of form with any type of storage system. You could start with this easy storage system here and then later build something more complicated. It's really very flexible. As for Minecraft versions, I don't think I use anything that hasn't been around for almost 10 versions, except of course these autocrafters. These are specific to 1.21, so if you play in an older version, you will have to replace the autocrafter or just leave it out and directly put the bones into the shulker box loader. On the other hand, if you play in an older version than 1.21, then you don't need this overclocked beacon. Just a regeneration beacon will be sufficient. Because this was a change in 1.21 that armor stands promote thorns damage, and in older version you wouldn't take any damage if you hit the armor stand. Now, in case you're still wondering why in the world would anyone want to have all of this junk, there's a very simple answer. Look at me, I do prefer chainmail armor. And I didn't bother to create the armor rod that sell them because I will always get enough chainmail stuff from this mob farm here. So I just grabbed this armor and enchant it. You also see that you can have the storage system accessible on the ground and the farm in the sky. That's one of the reasons why the items go into a cobweb, because then they have no momentum. They will fall straight down. So these items will fall into this collection system right here and then be sorted. I still use this mob farm occasionally, even though I have a much better creeper farm now, so I don't really need the gunpowder anymore. I also have a wither skelly farm, so I don't need the bones. So I actually use the farm mostly to get infect armor and also some arrows if I need them and some string. And of course you can also go AFK here for a while and get quite a few levels. It's a one-dimensional farm. It's also rather lag friendly, so you don't hurt the other players too much if you go AFK here. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you want to see more content like this. Please subscribe so that you don't miss any of my videos, and see you next time. Bye bye.